everyone. This is Heidi back with another video with Costume Co. And today I am so excited and delighted to have with me the wonderful, talented Christopher Hargadon, who is the costume designer for the Umbrella Academy. Hello, Christopher. Welcome.
Hello.
So this is something a little bit different because oftentimes I don't get the opportunity to have the actual costume designer on my show. But today, as a special treat, we have him, and he's taken some time out from his day to come and talk with us, and hopefully answer some of my questions, which hopefully will also be some of your questions, and we'll learn a little bit more about the show. So, Christopher, to start off with, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, and so everyone can get to know you a bit better.
Oh, well, let's see now. I mean, how I got into the business,
Yeah,
you're
like how,
thinking?
just tell me a bit about yourself and how you got into costume design.
Well, I initially went to this university as a translator. I was a linguist, so I spent my years at university training in that direction. But because I loved languages because I like travel, and I ended up living in France for almost 10 years. So at one point, when I was in my close to mid 20s, I got a job at a Club Med, and they sent me to Haiti, which was at that point a place that I wasn't familiar with and had no idea where it was even. And the next thing I knew, I was in Haiti, and I was hired as a tour guide at this Club Med. And Club Med back then was kind of the place to go. It was before Sandals or any of these other types of resorts existed. So it was a really interesting place to be. A lot of people my age, very fun and beautiful. I mean, they built a beautiful club. So I went there with a friend of mine from Marseille, and we set up all the tours for the club throughout the island. And over the course of the time that I was there, a designer from France came. She had a couture house in France, and we got to know each other. I took her and her husband for a tour. Her name was Catherine Salvet, and now, over the course of the day, we chatted, and I asked her if she ever hired apprentices in her design studio, and she said she did. And shortly thereafter, offered me an apprenticeship, which kind of took me by surprise. But I decided to take her up on it. I went back to France after the season was over, and I started to learn all about building of clothing and grading of patterns, sizing things, tailoring, all that type of thing. And I ended up staying there for about 3 years. I have to say, when I went in, I used to make my own clothes when I was a teenager, often because I couldn't find things to fit me back then. I'm tall, and things didn't have long sleeves on them, and they were sort of built for more average sized people. So I didn't necessarily know what I was doing, but I actually wore clothes that I made when I was a teenager. So I had a bit of an idea about certain things, but I really wasn't very knowledgeable. And so I started from zero and worked my way up. But by the time I'd been there for about 3 years, I really had accrued a lot of knowledge about, fashion and tailoring. And so I came back to North America after that stint, and worked for a company in Montreal designing clothes. I think I was hired to do a kids line, and then within a month I was doing a ladies line, a men's line, a kids line, and that was great experience. I moved after that to Toronto, and worked again, but in a completely non-design way, just learning the actual business. So I did everything business related. I was sort of the unofficial vice president of this company, and stayed there for another 3 years, and then I branched out on my own, and I started designing under a couple of labels of mine. And I did that until the recession hit in the late 80s, and then it was really hard to collect money. People were struggling. I was, sort of overworked, and I wasn't enjoying my. Actually, I met my now wife, and I wanted to have somewhat of a life back because I was working about 7 days a week. So um, anyhow, a friend of mine said, "Oh, come and work in the film business. The people are nice. You get a free lunch." And so I took him up on it, and then it just kind of from there. I worked through every different level of the costume department. I started off working on the wardrobe truck, sort of taking care of all the clothes and sending them off to set, etc., dressing the actors. Then I worked on the set, and then I, came into the office and worked as an assistant designer and a shopper and a supervisor, and then, but it all happened quite quickly. This is over the span of about 3 years. And then I got my first design job. I finally revealed to one of the producers that I had become friends with that I did have a design background, when she was stuck looking for somebody for a show she was producing. And so she gave me a try. And then after that, I just designed from then on. And I found that it was a good fit for me. I did start another business just to see. I manufactured wall hangings and interior things. I did a lot of Venetian stenciling and hats. I made tons of hats. This was like the early 90s. And it went really well, but then I just thought, this is great, but I don't really want to get back into manufacturing. I'd be very happy just to, design costumes for TV and film. So I've been there since then, since 94.
So I know everyone's really excited to know and learn more about the Umbrella Academy. So how did you get involved with that project?
Well, I got a call from my agent, and she said, I wanted to talk to you about this show. It's called the Umbrella Academy. And it's interesting because I don't know if it's from the years that I've been working, or I don't know, maybe it's something that I've developed. But when I hear about certain projects, sometimes I get a real rush. And when I knew nothing about it. I'd never read the books. I'd never heard of the Umbrella Academy before. But when she said those two words, I just got a real charge. And I said, yes, I'm really interested. And then, of course, I went out to research it, and I found these brilliant graphic novels that were so beautifully illustrated by Gabriel Ba, and just the quirky, dark, funny writing from Gerard Way. I thought this is really something that I'd love to be part of.
So regarding the novels and the graphic novels, did that inform your design at all?
Yes, absolutely. Anything that I do that has any kind of original content, or, whether it's a biographical piece, relating to people that actually, lived and breathed at a certain period of time, or something like this that already has a fan base and people, who know what the origins are. I always want to at least give a nod of appreciation and acknowledgement to the source. And with this, it hasn't followed the storyline directly. There's different reasons for that. I think that to actually produce, the actual storyline and the visuals, for us would be difficult, because it would, probably cost much more, and be a sort of a scheduling and the logistic, nightmare. But definitely, I always wanted to, no matter where the story went, and the characters themselves. When you look at the casting, Klaus was or Diego was this blonde guy, and Klaus wore all black and that type of thing. So these are things that evolve, as you go. As the casting came in and got approved, as a designer, you basically look to make a seamless blend of the director's or showrunner's vision, the actual actor and their comfort zone and their personality, and how they're going to adapt that from them into the character they're playing, and then also my inspirations and my vision for the whole thing. But it's really kind of a stewing pot of all these different influences from different people, and plus the original content of the graphic novels. So we really did take license, obviously, but I did want to do Diego, for instance, in the striped sweater. I thought the images were brilliant. The ladies, Allison and Vanya, in the graphic novels, I couldn't really see a huge difference between them. They both wore skirts and they sort of looked very similar. And then when we cast Emmy and Ellen, they were clearly very, very different personalities, and they looked different as well. And so, that sort of was a bit of a departure. But all the other people, like Hargreeves, I think his first outfits that he wore, I tried to sort of start with the coloration. He's very sort of, beige and gray in the storyline in the books. And then I started him off that way, but then I, evolved into more color in his costuming. Always muted, sort of sage greens and, navy blues and things like that. But just for visual appeal on screen, often you have to take these things into account just to make things more fun to watch.
Where else do you take your inspiration from?
It's actually a process that I've never really examined, but any new project that I take on, and I'm sure this is the same for any designer, it's like you almost become a magnet. If I go into a fabric store on one project, the things that will jump out at me will not be the same as the things on umbrella, for instance. It's you have a different sensibility, a different optic on the world in a way, and things kind of gravitate towards you. It's a really interesting dynamic that I can't really say I understand it, but it's really, I rely on it in order. But also, I have my knowledge that I've built over the years, my history of cinema knowledge, just having watched just about everything that was ever made, right through from the 20s on that was accessible. And so I always have that, period. I've always been very plugged into different period and their fashion. I found it super interesting, the sociological implications of clothing, how they reflect the society, whether it's, a communist society or a democratic society, pre-French Revolution to post-French Revolution. There are always these amazing details in aspects of clothing that just make it actually very alive and very present and quite fascinating and totally reflective of the time. So all these things sort of, plus my love of color and, fit, all that kind of stuff. And then you throw the character. I mean, all this goes into the character that you're trying to put into the story, through their costuming, what their closet looks like, and how they actually interact and blend together, because you need to also create a balance with all these different people so that, well, I mean, for instance, in season 2 of The Handler, she's obviously very dominant as far as, visual costuming goes on screen. So that was a planned thing. When I read the script, I said to Steve Blackman, our showrunner, I said, every time she walks on, I want it to be like an entrance. I want her to be making some major kind of statement, because she's just such a trippy, off the wall, insane character. And Kate embraced her to the nth degree. So between the two of us, I mean, our fittings were a riot. I mean, we just we just played off each other and just kept on going. So it was, it was a real pleasure. It was really kind of a gift to be able to do a character like that.
So what's your process like? Do you work closely with the showrunners? I know you mentioned, Kate, that you have a really great collaboration with her in terms of her costumes, but what's your process like in that?
A lot of the time it depends on the showrunner, but I found in the more creative shows that I've done, often the showrunner hires a person that they feel they can trust. So when I'm reading a script, if it's a good script, and this is one of the telltale things for me with writing and scripts, is if I read a script and I can see it as I'm reading it, then that for me is automatically a major positive. And for me on Umbrella Academy, that's very much the way it is. I read the scripts. I love it because they'll distribute the scripts, and then we have a very large office, and everybody will be in their corners reading the script, and you can hear people laughing in different parts of the room. And to me, that's just such a gift. I love knowing that people are enjoying and really getting into the story. And then when we start, working on the different costumes, they're that much more invested because they feel like they're doing something that's going to have a positive, great result potentially. So for me, my process is hopefully having an initial visual vibe just from reading it, and then since there's a lot of building on this show, for instance, you know, I can't be out of the office a lot. Once we get going, there's many levels of things going on, and I really have to be moving around the room for every different section, you know, sort of conferring and developing and evolving things with all my wonderful crew. So I end up being kind of chained to the office, but usually at the beginning of the show and then sometimes in the middle of the season, I'll make a break and I'll go to New York or I'll go out into the city and I'll do a major fabric haul. I mean, you know, just major. And this is with specific characters in mind. So I usually have quite a large stash of fabric, and as these scripts come through, often different fabrics that I've already pre-purchased come to mind as being perfect for, you know, any particular scene with a specific character. I mean, that's certainly the way the handler was. I had a lot of those fabrics like from the beginning of the season.
I was going to ask you that. So are you ever out and you see a fabric and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to use this for, but I
Oh
just
yeah,
need to grab it.
yeah, always. Like
Hmm.
that's the way I work. And I've got stuff that I haven't used yet. That every time you know, we unpack the office again and start a new season, and I see it, I'm like, I really want to use this. So you know, I've got my eye open for the exact moment where it's going to fit in perfectly.
Now, speaking of the handler, she is probably one of the most popular characters. At least, you know, when you go to your Instagram account, I can tell anytime you post something about her, everyone's like, wow. And, you know, I was saying if we were still having the cons, you know, like the that they have out in LA and Toronto, we have one. Unfortunately, they've been put off, but I bet you we would start seeing a lot of handlers. What do you think about that idea of people wanting to dress up in these costumes?
Well, I love it. I had the opportunity to go to Paris for the Comic Con there in October of 2019. And yeah, there was already a couple of handlers there just from the few outfits she had at the end of season one. It's always really interesting to see a different face or body shape in a costume. But the thing that I really appreciated when I went to Comic Con was the level of detail that people how they invest so much time and care into really trying to make it as authentic and close to the original as possible. And that's something I've actually found from my Instagram, which you know I never really put much up on until I did this show. But people constantly mention the detail, and for me, detail has always been sort of a paramount foundation of my approach to design. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past, I don't think ever showed on screen. You know, maybe if the actor walked on set, you only see them from the waist up or something, but I mean, they're always complete. They always have like the shoes that go with everything else. And, you know, often you'd have to get into an extreme close up to see some of the detail. But I just am so grateful for the feedback from people who like the show on my Instagram, just saying how much they notice the detail, because I never actually realized that people look that closely. And that's actually really encouraging to me and makes me want to do even better.
Now, this is probably an unfair thing to ask you, but is the handler your favorite character to design,
So
or do you have
unfair.
a? It is unfair. Okay, you don't have to tell me.
No, no. I mean, you know, yeah, you don't get a chance as a designer very often. When she took this part, um, I think in our very first chat on the phone, I said, seriously, I mean, how many times in your life are you going to be able to do something that's this crazy? I mean, really, there's no limitations. Steve, you know, and Kate are old friends, and you know, he basically said that she would have a lot of say in her costuming, and it just worked out really great that we have a mutual respect, understanding, and appreciation of costume. Kate loved dress up from the time she, you know, could walk, and has been waiting for a character like that, I think, her whole career. So she really went for it, and you know, we were just really pumped up and charged in all our fittings, just, and then she sort of say, well, what, more spiders, let's put more spiders on this. And, I'd have a box full of spiders, and we'd be placing them all over the place, artistically. So, yeah, I mean, she's a very, very dear and fond and wonderful memory of a costume collaboration, because, we were really in it 100% together. But, I have to say that all the actors on the show are so terrific to work with, and I just feel like they're all. I really felt like, I collaborate like that with all the characters. It's not quite so complex, necessarily, but yeah, we always have the discussions about what works for a scene. What they would feel best in a scene, and an array of things that we've already decided are good. So it's the same type of process. It's just I would say that the handlers' clothes are sort of an exceptional form of costuming. I would really welcome doing something where all the characters were that crazy. I mean, but different characters. It would just be. It would probably. I'd probably be spat out the other end like a husk of a human, because it would take everything out of you, because it's pretty intense. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, did you have a Kate Judy in your wardrobe department that you could be like, okay, Kate, I'm gonna put this outfit on you now and see how it looks?
Well, we had a bunch of Judys, and I think there was one that was sort of. Judys are all very standard, so nobody actually has a body like a Judy, but we would sort of form them and shape them in the right places, the hips and the bust and everything, so we could get an approximate, on the fit. And if you have the money and you can do it, you can actually have molds made, styrofoam molds of an actor's physique, and then you can do a lot on those. I actually had one for Tom Hopper, Luther,
really?
because his arms, I mean, Tom's in great shape, but he had to be huge. So his arms, his biceps were like this, and even with measurements, they were just so kind of out of the ordinary that it was good to have something that we could slip a shirt onto, or, we had arms that came off. So basically we could see how it would hang, and how it might look on him. And that was a big help as well.
Now, regarding the handlers' hats, that's super fun what you guys did there. And I love seeing hats on characters, because a lot of times in shows, the DOP, they say, okay, can't do hats because it casts shadows and so on. So that must have been an exciting thing for you to be able to do. Do you have a milliner that you like to work with, or what's your process for that?
Well, yeah, you need a milliner, and it's an art that is not widely practiced. I mean, there are some wonderful milliners around, but there aren't a lot. The fact that we got to put hats on Kate with all her outfits, which really finished the outfits, was because Kate really insisted, and she liked veils too. A lot of actors don't like a veil. Even when you see period shows, 40s, reenactments of that period, you often don't see veils, because a lot of, same thing, the cinematographer or the actor doesn't really like them. But she likes them. And, she would always, in deference, she'd always lift it up, as she started the scene. But every single hat she'd say, and could we put a veil? And so I had, a variety of colors and, sizes of the spacing and all that type of thing. But what was the question again?
Oh, so so what was your process with making the hats with
Okay.
your milliner, and how did that all go about?
Yeah, so my milliner in-house was the wonderful Melina Radeva, and she also is a specialty builder. So she did a lot of the building for the temps in the first season. She did the rigs for Diego, his knife rigs that he, supposedly made by himself out of scraps of leather, and knives that he got at the army surplus and that type of thing. So So she basically, I put on my Instagram her trying on the Chanel hat form, like of the brim. So she's amazing. In season one, she did all of the nanny's hats. They were like little. It was a cross between sort of a late 40s ladies style fedora and the hats that the Peruvian ladies wear traditionally. They're hats that I think they're felt or straw, some of them. But anyhow, it was they were just kind of small and tilted forward, and she made all those in about 3 days. I mean, she's just a dynamo. She's my secret weapon, I call her, and so yeah, and often Kate would send me pictures of hats that she likes, or I would pull up references of hats and then send them to her, and then sometimes we would adjust them or reshape them in a fitting, just depending on often I would have a few hats for her to try depending on the costume. There was one costume we did that was kind of a 50s where she has long hair in the second season, and it's a herringbone or a houndstooth, a big houndstooth that's sort of a lavender and cream. And
it's kind of like that the Chanel looking one.
It's a cape. It's got a cape on it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that one. Yeah.
And so I designed a hat that was more sort of 50s, and then she wanted to do an envelope hat, sort of military style. And so I made both, and then we ended up going for that one. And that's sort of what riffed me into putting her in the purple military, the takeover outfit, which is very militaristic. Sort of
the one with it's got like these. If anybody, we'll put a picture up, but it has like these giant pannier sort of. It has a bit of a Marie Antoinette sort of feel.
Yeah, well, it's totally, yes, it does. Because I mean, Marie Antoinette, she dressed in military styles, to honor naval victories and things like that. She was very political in her dress, and so all those kind of things I love, those little historical insights that I can apply to crazy ass characters like the Handler.
Now, one of my favorite costumes, this is probably everybody's favorite costume, is her coronation outfit. And now you were speaking about the spiders. What's the deal with the spiders? And was that sort of neck thing, was that intended to be like a spider web? I mean, maybe it's more on the nose than I thought.
Well, when we had our initial discussions, Kate said that she really wanted the Handler to be beautiful on the outside, but if you sort of peeled away the outer layer, she was like a cockroach inside. So this kind of very creepy, not appealing internal element, but high fashion and completely the opposite on the exterior. But as we kind of progressed with things, I started to just, because we were talking about creepiness, I started to amass all varieties of bugs, and I think we ultimately settled on spiders. I had quite an array of them. I had vintage amber ones with metal legs, and I had just dime store plastic ones that we painted and sort of treated to make them look like they were metal. But I had them in all shapes and sizes. So we did apply spiders to. There's a purse that she has in her arrival in Dallas with the blue sort of Audrey Hepburn meets Marge Simpson outfit. And it's right on her purse. It's a white purse, and it's got a blood red body with these gold legs. So that was the first scene that we shot, and we really started getting into these creepy crawlies. So whenever we thought we could sneak some in, we did. And the biggest place was the coronation outfit. I don't know how many we put on there. I'll have to count them someday, but there were dozens and all different sizes. And the armature that she had. I didn't start off with that collar piece at all. It was basically a strapless type of gown, but as I just played, sketched and doodled, I really felt like I wanted to militarize her a little bit, even though she was all rhinestones and sort of sparkle. I wanted to give her an armor kind of feel. So that was really almost like when she's in her fitting before the coronation, she doesn't have her actual overskirt on, but she's got this breastplate that she holds up to herself, and it's got a big lion head in the middle of it. That was another
Yeah, very
option.
Cersei Lannister. The
Yeah,
lion.
and I just wanted, I didn't want to lose that because I thought it was great. There was no place for it, so we decided she would just kind of be playing with, different elements and deciding what she was going to, because she could have worn that with it as well. I mean, I think what she ended up wearing was the better choice.
But
So
then she has to have a crown, right? Because she's like she thinks of herself, even she's like a Marie Antoinette sort of, but she's also like got that military aspect to her.
yeah, that's right. I mean,
Hmm.
everything about that costume was really kind of metallic and I thought quite hard looking. And I started off with the overskirt was actually going to be the same fabric as the dress, just a very classic kind of early 50s gown kind of thing. But then, the more we discussed, I thought maybe it should be a cage. And I ended up getting this, it's called Bemis. It's like a sealer. It glues things together, but it's a very, very fine sheet of this adhesive. So we Bemis together three different layers. There was sort of a sparkly layer, and then over that we put something else, like another kind of organza or something a bit shimmery. And then on top of that, we put this actual mesh that I guess it's probably almost like a plastic, but it was formable, like we could mold it. And so it's in a way you can actually see through the thing. And I'm always a sucker for transparencies. I love it when you can sort of have elements in costumes that you can see through, where there's like more than one dimension to it. So that's how she came out in that one. It was pretty over the top, but
Now, one of the things, of course, about the Umbrella Academy are the Hargreaves children, and that, that they're essentially, especially in season one, they're superheroes. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about their outfits. You had said to me when we had our little chat on the phone that, they're not your typical superhero uniforms outfits because they're wearing their school uniforms. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Christopher?
well, that was really from the novel, and Gerard Way, when he conceived these storylines, it was before the advent of all the Marvel and DC superhero things. I mean, he did this over 20 years ago. But he basically, I think, was looking at an anti-superhero kind of scenario. So that's why they're not adults, they're children. And, about the biggest opposition to a cape and a superhero costume is a private school uniform. So it was really from him that this came, and all I really did was when I came on board, uh, as I was mentioning before, when you're putting characters together, you have to make sure, and it's really just kind of a thing that you feel and sense as you go, but everything has to blend. They have to blend with each other, and they have to blend with the set decoration and the lighting, and it's all basically a bit of a chemistry lab thing that you want it to all look right. So I made up a uniform, or I had a uniform made up in black and white because that's what it is in the novels. And in the novels, it's very graphic. On a flat page, it looks fantastic. But if you actually do that in the environment that we were shooting in, it becomes extremely dominant. And I realized that the black and white was too strong for our purposes. And I also wanted something that just was a little bit easier on the eyes in person. So, I mean, I was pretty definitive about the color. I wanted it to be sort of a blue gray. And when I met with the fabric distributor, there was only one that I like. It actually is a uniform fabric that the military uses. And I just knew that that was the one right away that I wanted to use because I also wanted to have a bit of pop, not much, but so I didn't go red. I just went burgundy. And there was also a mention that down the line there was going to be the sparrows, and they were going to be red. And this was brand new. It was before the new novels came out, so I was very conscious about that. But so I went with burgundy, and then just had to figure out a blend of the colors in the sweater vests, so it would just look like a complete unit. And so that's how that whole costume came about.
Now, one of the costumes that I just think is an absolute riot is the Leonard Peabody, his his attempt to wear an Umbrella Academy
Poor
uniform.
guy.
I know, but it's so great. And I mean, I noticed it immediately. And it looked like to me, being a Canadian, it looked like duct tape. How did you guys go about making that one?
Well, Steve, our showrunner, really wanted it to be super homemade looking, like something that a kid could actually do. Because sometimes, on movies or TV, you'll have something that is supposed to be a child's thing, and it's all very elaborate and designed. So they wanted absolutely for it, to be obviously imperfect looking. So we did a few variations on things. I think you're right. I think it was duct tape. I mean, just basically, gluing things, instead of sewing and stapling. I think that the trim was stapled on.
Yeah, he
And
did his own. He did his own binding, but he did it with
it
like
was
he
like
said,
some kind of crappy red plastic tape. And then
yeah.
the patch from the Umbrella Academy on the blazer actually came off a cereal box because I guess the kids, in their fame were all over the place. And at one point, I think he's sitting having breakfast, and the whole back of the cereal box is cutouts, and one of them is the umbrella patch. So, but I think we made it like oversized or something. There's something off about it. So, I don't know if they do that with cereal boxes anymore, but when I was a kid, they did.
Yeah, I know they yeah, I don't know if they do like I know they do like, whatever is the popular thing at the time. They will oftentimes have on the back that things that kids or like even on McDonald's they have these things that you can punch out. So
Yes, they do.
now I know that a lot of viewers love the pretty dresses. I tend to always gravitate toward the men's costumes, and one of my favorites, probably my favorite design of yours, is Sir Reginald. And of course Comfior, who's in Canada, he's a treasure. Not
Mhm.
as well known. We were talking about this. Not as well known, maybe, but he's one of those faces you would know him if you saw him. He's been in so
Yeah.
many
Well,
great
yes, he's been
shows.
in many, many things. And it's funny because I was in the production I'm on right now, I was promoting him to the producers. And that's exactly what I called him. I said he's a treasure.
Yeah, it's like Gordon Pinsent. Like,
Yeah.
Everyone in Canada knows Gordon Pinsent, but maybe outside of Canada they may not know him as well. So, you were telling me some really fun stories about doing fittings with him. What was that like to work with him as an actor and dress him?
Well, the thing about Combe is that he's one of those people that can just wear clothes. I mean, he looks, he has real grace in his movement. He's very physical. And sort of at ease in his own body. So when you put clothes on him and fit them, he just looks like a treat. I mean, he's like a Christmas present all wrapped up. And the wonderful thing about Combe is that after he tries something on, he's such an appreciator of costume, coming from a lot of theater. He'll say, "This is too good to just look at between us. Can I go through the sewing room and show the ladies and the cutters?" And so he'll do a whole parade of all the, pieces that he really feels are outstanding. And they'll all be clapping, and he'll be doing pirouettes. And, he's just a ton of fun. And yeah, I mean, and there's probably a lot more costumes that we built for him that people might really register because they're just quick flashes. But we built some really crazy coats for him. And, I always, even before I found out or read the script at the end of the first season and realized that he's an alien, or maybe, no, it's actually in the second season. Spoiler alert, sorry. But
Yeah, I'll put a spoiler at the beginning.
anyway, before
Well, I
before
think
we
I think I even told you I'm like I think they do let you know that he's an alien in season 1, but I forgot. And then we got to season 2 and I'm like, "Oh my god, he's an alien."
Well, the thing is that they don't show him doing anything like super alien-y until he kills all those the Magnificent Seven, 12 or whatever they are in the Dallas Tiki Bar. That's when Hargreeves' skin comes off and gets thrown on the ground, and then you just hear all those horrible sounds.
Yeah, you
but
can't even unimaginable.
but yeah, I mean, at the end of the first season, he's in some undisclosed location with missiles and things in the background in the window, and it's all very. They asked me to choose a period, and I chose 1830 basically because I just love the Romantic period. And then as a side sort of bonus, even though he doesn't really need it, the neck is all wrapped with sort of a tie and very high in the neck. So he was playing younger. So I think supposedly they thought that helped. But anyhow,
And it suits the monocle as well. It sort of ties in nicely, I think, to that era.
yeah. I mean, the thing about Hargreaves that I really dig is that when he came into season 2 in the 60s, I got to do him like a James Bond type of character. He drove a snappy car. I wanted him to be really kind of, Bond Street cutting edge, color, very sleek silhouette. If you saw his shoes, they were iridescent, multicolored, like sort of textured leather. I mean, if we could have done close-ups on some of his details, he was always showing a little bit of an alien vibe, very discreetly. But
Yeah, like you've got like some lizard sort of reptile textures in some of his clothing, and I think
yeah,
little
definitely.
hints there and there, here and there. Now, one of the things we had talked about is his coat that he wears, that 60s coat that came from your personal collection. And maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about your collection that you had.
That I had.
That you
Well,
had.
because I love period so much, as soon as I got into this business, whenever I could, I would either buy the clothes that I had purchased off shows, or go out and supplement. And I have to say, the difference between vintage shopping from the early '90s to now is very different. In the early '90s, there were still tons of '50s, '60s, '70s. And other, like I bought 20s, 30s, 40s. And so over about a 25-year period, I accumulated a rather massive collection. I mean, literally thousands of hats, and, it was a warehouse full of clothes. And, I bought our home, we sort of have moved far away to another part of the world. So I knew I couldn't bring the collection with me, so I did sell it, but I sold it to a rental house, so it's still accessible to people. Which is what my intent was and my hope. But that coat was in the rental house now. So the reason I wanted to, I needed multiples on that coat because there were stunts, and I wanted to be able to do variation on the actual drape of the lower part of the coat, so that when he was spinning and everything, there would be more like flapping and volume going on. But then when he was walking, it would be more fitted to the body. So I went and got that coat. The thing I loved about it was it's from the '70s, early '70s, and there was a whole movement in the early '70s. It started with Biba in London for ladies that was very vintage inspired, a lot of '20s kind of feeling things. And this particular coat, it had almost like an Edwardian sort of 1911, 1915 kind of feel. Very tailored, so fitted in the upper chest and through the waist.
Does it have a separate skirt? Like a
No,
seam in a skirt?
no, it's attached, but
Okay.
we made about 5 of them. So for the different types of things during the stunts, he or the stunt person would change, and we get either the sort of like twirling effect, or just a little, when he's walking away with pogo, it's sort of back to normal.
Now, one of my favorite parts of the show, of course, in season 2 is the 60s. That's really fun. Were you excited when you read that you were going to be having to do a 60s era? And how did you go about researching that?
I wasn't all that excited because I've
Oh,
done the
really?
60s before. No, like it was like, no, 60s, whatever. But now I have to say that I loved it. I mean, as soon as I started getting into it again, I think sometimes I was talking to a good friend of mine who's a designer, And, she was talking about a couple of things she's been offered, and said, like, one of them's a Western. And I'm sort of like, I've already done 3 Westerns, so I don't want to do it. And I understand that, because all these shows can be such a lot of work. If you've done it intensively more than once, I can totally identify with not necessarily wanting to do it again. And I've done the 60s, in various sizes, numerous times. But the thing that was actually really, really amazing about the season 2 of Umbrella is that it took place in Dallas in '63. And the clothes that I ended up buying as a base for the show came from Dallas, and they were all 60s. So when I watch the show, I look at the people in the background, and I think, this really lends authenticity to this, because it's not just clothes that came from all over the place. They were actually clothes that people in Dallas wore. It was just a really serendipitous thing that there was a designer who had like me, he had a big inventory that he had built up over the years, and he was selling it. And he also had a range of decades, but his 1960s stock was intact. So God bless.
That's like serendipitous, because you were just saying that finding vintage clothes is so difficult nowadays. You must have just been like, wow, how did this even happen?
Yeah, because you end up renting. If you buy in a large volume, it's just so much more, budget friendly, because, we all have to operate with budgets, and could have gotten very expensive. But, I think that everybody was happy. The person who sold me the clothes was happy, and I was happy. I just have to acknowledge Stephen for the wonderful contribution that he made to the show, because without that, it would have been, we still shopped, obviously. I mean, we rented, we shopped, we, continued. I built a lot, but a lot of Allison's dresses were from his collection.
Oh, they were? Okay, because I was going to ask you about that next.
Yeah, the yellow dress, the yellow and white halter dress, I think, that she wears, that was one of his. That's the first thing I think that she tried on. And the wonderful thing with Emmy was that she, I dressed her contemporary in the first season, but in the second season, she just walked into the clothes. I mean, it was really, and she loved them too. Like, she was really attracted to the different styles of dresses, and the character was very different, because she wasn't, a wealthy, actress. She was basically a working girl / homemaker. So they were very character oriented clothes. It was great. I'm interested to see what she will be in the 3rd season, because, I don't know what any of them will be in the 3rd season. It's going to be a whole different.
Oh, so you haven't seen a script yet?
I've seen one script.
Okay.
But I haven't seen the sort of the arc of the season to know. One of the big questions when you're doing these things is where they get their clothes from. I mean, Emmy in season 1, they all come from wherever they were, and then they just stay in the house. So where are they getting more clothes? Well, Klaus starts raiding his dad's closet. Number 5 always wears the same thing anyway. You have to have a bit of variety, but the clothes can't just sort of materialize out of nothing. And that was a big one in season 2. Where did Diego and after they escaped the institution, where did Diego and Lila find their clothes, and how are they changing? Where Klaus, he was sort of living with or off of that wealthy lady. And so, some of the clothes were from her husband's closet, who is, I think, deceased, and then some of them were from her closet. Excuse me. And then we had a lot of clothes that we pulled for him or made for him that we didn't actually have an opportunity to play. So I don't really, know which ones came from whose closet anymore, but
Yeah, because they sort of arrive in the 60s with the clothes on their back, and then they leave the 60s with the clothes on their back.
Yeah, they leave with different clothes on their back.
With different clothes on their back.
Yeah, and that was a big question with the actors. So, like, how did this happen? Like, where did these clothes come from?
So you do have to sort of, these are all things that people who don't work in costume design don't probably think about oftentimes.
Well, and you know what? Hopefully, when you watch the show, you don't have to think about those things, because they're not really things that you want to have distracting from the story. You
Oh yeah,
know,
absolutely. I always find, like, especially in contemporary shows, if I'm not really thinking about the costumes, I mean, even though I go in looking at it as from a costume point of view,
hmm
I always think they're doing a great job because I didn't really notice it. But if I'm kind of like, whoa, that sort of sticks out. It's like the music, you watch a show and the music is sort of a bit jarring. You're thinking, whereas if you don't notice it, that's probably a good sign.
yeah, it's all part of that integration. That
Hmm.
seamless integration of all the elements. But so that's also an art. Just very subtly, introducing things that mirror the other thing enough so that you don't necessarily even notice consciously that it's a change. But the subconscious, I think, keeps the interest going.
But one of the costumes that I did really like, whoa, this is awesome, is you had that cigarette girl outfit.
Oh,
It's pink.
yeah.
Oh my God. I
And
saw that and I
what was
was
her
like,
name? Autumn.
what? Sorry?
Autumn.
Autumn. You want
Yeah.
to tell me? But I saw on your Instagram you had a picture of your crew working on it
Yeah.
in the
Oh,
wardrobe,
we were bedazzling it on a Friday night.
bedazzling it.
It
And
takes a long time.
did you ever say, okay, enough? Or did you say, no, just keep going?
Well, with bedazzling, keeping going is
You
like the
keep
name of the
going.
game. I mean, yeah, no, enough usually comes after like X number of hours, and everybody's like,
Yeah. Their
but
eyes are.
but no, it was a real party that evening. We did research obviously into Jack Ruby's actual burlesque club. It was early '60s. The thing about when I was orienting my younger costumers about the period is that there's a real simplicity to it. So obviously there were some very beautiful, well, many beautiful things, but even if you look at Jackie Kennedy, when before she became, when she was a senator's wife, and then when she became the president's wife, her types of clothes, they had very beautiful simplicity in the lines. The fabrics were all, very specific to the cut and period. So just looking, at a much sort of lower level of costuming or dressing, the burlesque ladies in the Jack Ruby's club were very simple. I mean, they were almost like bathing suits, just kind of like black, two-piece bathing suits or something like that. There was nothing really all that. And I remember telling Steve, well, I think we'll do something a little extra for the ladies in the club. And he goes, of course you will. But so the dancers, there were servers and dancers, and you didn't really see all of them, I don't think, but one was olive and one was sort of in like a bluey tone, and then there was a goldy tone, and then there was Autumn, who was in sort of a champagne color, because there was a question of her also being a champagne girl, but she ended up being the cigarette girl. Then there was Franny, who was a professional burlesque dancer up on stage. She was in orange, and there was another burlesque dancer on stage. I can't remember what color she was in, kind of a tealy kind of color or something. So we did a lot of costumes, but Amber, because she was a speaking part, and she, I wanted her to sparkle. And when I actually saw her on set. They'd wigged her, and her own natural blonde hair is kind of cut in a little, almost quite short, not like a boy, but it was just so cute. I almost was disappointed because the wig was authentic, styling for the time, but it made her look a little bit more mature. Whereas in with her natural hair, I thought that she looked very sort of fresh and almost innocent in a way. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, that whole scene to do. But I have to say, these things happen like in the blink of an eye. I mean, between the time that we read the script and they actually scheduled that scene, we didn't have a lot of days. It was maybe a week or something like that.
Yeah, crazy turnarounds that you
Yeah, I
have to
think
do.
we started it on Monday and then played the next Monday.
One of the characters I wanted to talk to you about was Diego, because one of the things I noticed is that I don't know if it was the actor's physique or just his height, like he feels a little bit shorter to me. I'm not sure if he is shorter, but he just really seemed to fit in really well into the 60s. Did you find that sort of worked for him really well?
Well, when I saw the actual completed show, I thought everything kind of worked. The only thing I didn't really understand, but I never questioned was his long hair because, nobody really had long hair like that in the early 60s. But then we did play with Klaus. Like Klaus was actually vibing more on like 1967, and as well as Rita, who played Lila. So the characters weren't necessarily nailed into that specific year, but my direction for his costuming was they wanted to really give him more of a Latino kind of feel. So my sort of approach to that was a little bit more color in the, he didn't actually wear some of the things because really there weren't a lot of changes over the course of the episodes for him. But I had sort of a persimmon kind of orangey kind of shirt for him, and
Yeah, that's the one I remember that
I
just
know
really
I
worked
put him
well
in
on him.
I put him in a sort of a burgundy T-shirt, so sort of spicy, hotter colors, and then he also had a black shirt, which is kind of a typical look for that time. But yeah, I mean, in a way, these characters, they're kind of, for me, they're almost timeless. I mean, I almost could watch Diego dressed like that in a contemporary thing, and I still wouldn't really blink an eye. I know that Tom was really happy to get out of the earth tones because I just felt him in earth tones for season 1, but he's a blue boy, as a lot of guys are. And he was just very happy because his clothing was really sort of a uniform. He had to be able to go from wearing, that to the boxing ring. So with, a simple taking off of jacket and shirt or whatever. So,
Although I love that trench that he wore. That it was sort of greenish, wasn't it? That trench, that
in season 2,
oversized in season 1. Sorry.
oh, season 1, oh yeah,
Yeah,
that was like a Russian greatcoat
yeah, I
from the
love that.
First World War. Yeah, that was one of my season 1 victories because I submitted a bunch of sketches for Luther, a leather jacket and a bunch of things anyway, and nobody was interested in the greatcoat, and I just felt like the greatcoat would be a thing for him, so I built it. Had it with the guys. I built it anyway, and then they all loved it when they saw it. So
Yeah, they used it
sometimes
in
you
the.
have to actually make a little more and give a choice because it's hard sometimes to imagine in advance what's going to work. But it had movement and it kind of balanced him because season 1 he had a very different prosthetic muscle suit. It was sculpted foam, and when they finished the season, the producers told me that in certain shots they didn't like the way it looked. That it was, if you sat down, it kind of bunched up and that type of thing. But again, these things, you have to evolve them. You don't have a lot of time. I mean, these things all take time to sort of formulate. But we got the muscle suits from LA, and then we had to kind of sculpt them down, kind of open them up and sculpt them down. And he had a few of them just for practicality. But sculpting one and sculpting another, it's an imperfect sort of science. So they weren't necessarily all the same. They were similar, but they weren't all the same. And the originals weren't all the same either. So it was kind of a bit of an issue that I was always addressing in the first season. So in the second season, I went to a different resource, and the place was called Thingergy in Los Angeles. And Frank, who runs Thingergy, was very understanding and does a lot of this kind of work as well. But we molded the muscles this time so that there'd be more consistency between the different suits. And
Yeah, no. I was reading though, Tom Hopper said in an interview that the muscles he gets smaller.
well, that was what we did in the second season. We pared him down a little bit.
So he was happier with season 2.
Oh yeah. He
Mhm.
was much, and I think everybody was, and I think he was also more comfortable, just in general. And then also season 2, we had a full-time person, tending to him because you get hot in those things.
Did he have a cooling vest under there?
He wore a cooling suit when he needed it, but you need
Okay.
somebody to be changing the ice pack and just basically. A lot of actors have dressers, but Luther / Tom definitely merited an individual to be, paying attention to him because, it's tiring being in something like that. And all the muscle suits, and all the the big movies, even if the actor has an amazing physique, they still have to wear a muscle suit under those things to look the way they do. So even and Tom's in top shape, but he's just too lean. But if you're supposed to look lean, you still end up wearing a muscle suit.
So then I wanted to get to Klaus, who is amazing. I love Klaus, and I think you do too. I can sort of tell through your design of him. Tell me a bit about his costumes and what it was like to create those for his character.
Well, Robert is such a trip. I mean, I've never met anybody like Robert before. He's just completely open. And we were dressing him. My goal with him in the first season was to sort of dress him in a balance. He in his personal life wears a lot of ladies' clothes because he's tall and but he's slim enough to be able to wear fitted lady stuff, and on him it looks kind of perfect, like it was made for him. So anyhow, I started off the season in one with an equal balance of men's and ladies' clothes, and I'm mostly tops. I'm thinking.
Is it like that crochet knit one that he wore the star with?
Yeah, that was a lady's top.
And is it one of those things that's really skinny, but when you put it on, it just sort of stretches out? Is it one of those types of things?
Yeah, it's kind of it wasn't a stretch fabric. It was kind of a crinkly cotton. But yeah, definitely, he wasn't uncomfortable in it. It conformed to his body without being uncomfortable. And I mean, that was vintage, actually, that top.
Oh.
It wasn't 60s or, even 70s or 80s, but it was, probably at least 20 years old, that thing. Those are things, I mean, some of those things literally came from the rag picker. I mean, from a supplier of, rags, or they send clothes to Africa. It's a warehouse that you go into, and there are masses of piles. Like all the followers, all of their clothes came from the rag picker, and then we dyed them. It was all that sort of boho hippie kind of.
Do you buy that by the pound? Is that the type of thing? It's like you buy the pound. We used to have a place in Toronto.
You used to be able to buy the Goodwill by the pound. It was
by the pound.
One of my
You'd have to go in there with a mask and gloves and hair covered because it's toxic.
Off this interview, I could tell you about a couple of experiences I had that kind of made me less enthusiastic about the by the pound store. But
sure.
But I don't know if they actually do that anymore. I mean, they might do it, but not with film people. I mean, they know that we've got some money, so they usually charge by the piece. But it's very reasonable because vintage people shop in these places. That's where vintage clothes often come from different shops. Anyway, so then after a couple of months of working, Robert said to me, "Chris, I only want to wear ladies' clothes." And I said, well, okay, well, we'll see about that. So I talked to, the showrunner, and he said, no. So anyhow, but, basically, I think with Robert, he looks right in all this stuff. So it really didn't matter. I think he probably did mostly wear, ladies' stuff. And then in season 2, we ended up, I found a really cool cowboy shirt that was period. We needed a whole bunch of them. So I had to, have it duplicated multiple times. But so he did wear some men's stuff, combined with some of the ladies' stuff. But I think it's a great frustration for people who adore Klaus and they want to find some of these specific items because they're just really one-offs that come from another time, and even if you wanted to make it, finding the fabric wouldn't exist anymore and that type of thing. So.
Yeah, and that coat he wears, sort of that Nehru collar coat, Indian coat. You made that, I'm assuming, in your
yeah. I mean, it was immediately from the beginning scripted a Sherwani. So a Sherwani is sort of a dress jacket / coat that they wear in Southeast Asia, and so my shopper Brenda went out and she picked up a couple of Sherwanis, and I have to tell you, they're heavy. I mean. It's really padded and shaped like an actual, coat or a substantial sports jacket. And, it just didn't really give the Klaus information that was necessary. They were nice, but first of all, it was virtually impossible to find them in multiples. I mean, they're really just one-offs or maybe a couple. I just wanted something that would have movement, that would have some color, something more fun. So, understanding the idea of the Sherwani, that's when I set out. And I think I was in New York, and I found this fabric that was a white, and it was ridged. It had dimension to it. And actually, somebody asked me on Instagram about it, like how they could make one. And we actually ran out of fabric. I bought all the fabric and they couldn't get any more. So my crew thought I was like crazy, but I said, well, why don't we buy like a base fabric that's like a canvas or something that will soften up if we wash it. And then we'll run lines of iridescent pearlized puff paint onto the, which, is obviously quite labor intensive. And there were a lot of moans and kind of like, outcries of like, this isn't going to work.
Who doesn't like working with puff paint though? It's so fun.
Well, anyhow, that was a victory for me, because when they did it, we made the coat up. You couldn't actually even tell the difference. I mean, I almost couldn't tell the difference. So it was actually a win for me.
So that's great.
But I'm always open to accepting it if it's not going to work.
So that's great then. If someone wants to recreate it, they could just get some of a canvas like you used and wash it and then soften it.
Yeah, what we did was we cut not cut the fabric out, but we actually traced the pattern onto the fabric beforehand, and then we ran the lines. So you didn't have to do more than was necessary. Basically you did it on the pattern, and then, whatever was going to be cut away, you didn't bother with.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, because there's so many lines, and, as long as you have a general, fairly straight line, they can be broken. They can sort of not always be, even or whatever. You don't really see it in the finished result because ultimately it's white. And then.
And how many of those coats did you end up having to make?
About 12.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because he rolls around, he's stunted, he's picked up and carried away, and there's all kinds of things that go on with that thing. So you really, you really want to cover yourself so that you're not imperiling your set supervisor on the day if there's anything blood or anything that might happen, which didn't happen with him, but you need a lot. I mean, that's the one thing that makes it a little more challenging doing a period show that has action. Because you'll find great things, but you can't find more. The stores are closed for the 1960s, so
yes,
it's even hard today. Sometimes to find multiples. I'm working on something right now, and I need multiples, and particularly with COVID, the stocks are diminished. I mean, if you're ordering online, they'll say, "Okay, order taken," and then 3 hours later, you'll get an email saying, "Sorry, out of stock." It's multiples is always a challenge for our
and people, I think a lot of businesses maybe are letting their inventories go lower just because keep their overhead down a bit.
Yeah, I mean, makes sense, definitely.
What I wanted to ask you about is number 5. So you mentioned like number 5, he's pretty much in one outfit, but I mean, obviously, have there been variations on his outfits through the 2 seasons?
No.
Really?
I mean, slight variations into season 2 for growth.
Of the actor growing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
how many multiples? You must have like dozens of his outfit.
Yeah, I'd say I have like at least 15 of him.
Yeah, because obviously, and then with blood and dirt and all that type of thing.
Well, they're
going to the future.
There's stand-ins, body doubles, stunt guys. It's so funny in season 1, the stunt guy, I think, had sort of hairy legs. Somehow it got by everybody. So I think that it was a bit of an issue at one point. Now I'm going to have to go look for that. I think, I never noticed it, but I think that either they had a different person or he had to shave his legs the second season.
That's so funny.
Hilarious.
So, and how is the actor about that? He's probably like, this is awesome. I get to wear the same thing.
Well, I think that he's been a good sport about it. I think that he'd be ready for a change, and don't have all the intel yet, but I think we might see a little, variation in the future.
Maybe in season 3 we'll see something.
Maybe.
All right. Now, what about Vanya?
Ellen took this role under the specific direction that she would play an androgynous character. She really, wanted to sort of represent that community and sort of bring it into the mainstream. So that was from the very beginning, very specific in her clothing direction. So I think in a way, I'd never really dressed an androgynous character before. So, I looked up a lot of androgynous images, different people, male and female, dressing in that manner. And so it was, for me, it was funny because, Ellen would be so sweet and fitting. She's saying, "This is awesome." And I was looking, I've never dressed a lead quite as plainly as this, but it went with the character because she was meant to be a wallflower, really, a person who didn't have a lot of self-confidence or self-esteem, who'd been hidden in the background pretty much her whole life, who didn't know her own value or her abilities, her powers. So yeah, that was really the crux of her sartorial direction from the beginning. And then when we got into season 2, it was just really, is this what a boy would wear? And so my thinking, when Steve Blackman asked me where she got her clothes from, I said, well, she's actually not that much different in size from Harlan, who is Sissy's son, the autistic child who lives on the farm. And so anyhow, we just basically went with that. I mean, whether it was all that logical or not, that was, the idea of where she got most of her clothes from. So I think she wore jeans, which seemed to suit for the farm, and plaid shirts and T-shirts, and very, very sort of simple, kind of neutral kind of dressing, but just nothing feminine. Like there was never a feminine element to any of, I showed Ellen things like, an image of Gene Seberg in the 60s wearing a, boat neck, maillot top, the striped, French Marine kind of thing. I did, base a lot of her clothes on things that were a little different that I found that were actual pieces. I went to a vintage mart in New York at one point, and they had a lot of things. There was one company called Moth Food, and I'm not sure what state they're from, but they had things that you just never find. T-shirts from the time, often they'd have stains on them and that type of thing, but you would see what the neckline was like. I mean, there are certain things like knits, men's things that really haven't survived from that time because they were cut up into rags or shipped away to a third world place and recycled. All the stuff that they carried more or less was some form of cotton. They had corduroys and twills, and they had these French naval pants, which was a pant that I actually purchased to build for Klaus. I'm trying to remember if he actually ended up wearing them. I think I found one that was already made that,
like with a flap front and the buttons?
Yeah, had a flap
love
front.
Those.
But I found an actual designer, contemporary designer one in navy that had the gold buttons for the flaps. So I think and they were slightly belled, and kind of cropped. So I think that's what he ended up wearing. But we did experiment with some of that stuff. But with Vanya, there was one. It was a top, and it was had a little collar that was piped, and then a zipper, and it was a men's top and a little pocket that also had piping on it. And it was just a style that was dead simple, but I'd never actually seen one in all my years of vintage, sourcing. So I grabbed that, and then we made it in a dark green, and really you don't see the detail in it, but that again, super understated. So really, I don't think it's really something that you notice. All of the scenes with her and Sissy, Marin, were so emotional and kind of touching. I really was hoping that the costumes wouldn't be too noticeable. I wanted all that emotion to come out in full force. I just found all of their scenes together very moving.
Oh, they were absolutely. I mean, Sissy's, she's obviously a little more, she's more feminine. That definitely comes out, but not overly feminine, I found.
Well, her
I can
whole
see my mom dressing like that, for
yeah,
instance.
Sissy's whole jam was that she was kind of, even though Carl, loved her, and he was just like a kind of a meat and potatoes, guy who just probably didn't really have the wheelhouse to understand her. But he wasn't a bad person per se. But the idea with her character was that she starts off almost dressed by him, certainly dressed for him. So she wears all these, full skirts and a little poodle top or cardigans, and all very sort of sweet and American apple pie kind of things. And when Marin first came in and I was showing her the clothes or the range of clothes, what I wanted to do, she really kind of bumped against them. She said, "Well, I don't really know if that's the way she should dress." And then I explained that her arc was that she would start off in this more restrictive world, this element of dress that would, be less free. And as, the story progresses, she would evolve into more of who she really was. So that's when she started to appear in trousers and sort of comfortable, short sleeve sweater tops and things like that. Whenever Carl was away, Sissy dressed the way she wanted to dress. And I actually base that a little bit on my own experience because I was born in Connecticut, and my mom had four boys under the age of 6. She was 30, and she had these four boys under the age of 6, and
Oh my
we
gosh.
virtually lived in the country. I mean, it was probably she had to learn how to drive because she'd never driven before that. She was a war bride from England, and just basically had never really had the need to drive before. But once we moved to Connecticut, she needed to get her license. But I remember my mother. We were out in the country, so she wore dungarees. I mean, basically jeans, because she had all these rowdy little kids, and but she was very beautiful and very feminine, and she loved clothes. And whenever she went out, she would be completely put together. But in her day-to-day life, when she wasn't going to leave the house, that's what she wore. And I kind of based Sissy a little bit on my mom.
Hmm. Yeah. And so when you explained that, did that sort of ring true for her?
Oh yeah, no, then she got
Hmm.
it. And then she was,
Okay.
I think she even posted something on her Instagram about her poodle top costume, basically. I think that, and oftentimes that's what happens. I really appreciated Ellen at the beginning of the second season in our first fitting. She said, when we were shooting the first season, I didn't really, she self admits that she doesn't really think about clothes a lot. And so she didn't really understand what my plan was or what I was doing. But when she actually saw the series completed, she really appreciated, how everything was put together. And I remember when we were shooting the final scene, the theater scene with all the temps at the end of season 1, and she was in her cutaway white coat,
Oh, I
all
love that.
her sort
Hmm.
of like Zool kind of, where she expands into this, force. She said, I don't really think much about clothes, but I really like this, and I think this might be something I could wear to a gala or something
Hmm.
like that. It really looked amazing on her. But it's so for me, as a costume designer, when people give me that kind of feedback, it's very rewarding because it shows that they get it and that they appreciate it on top of it, which is really great and important. Yeah, I had our neighbor in Hawaii has a friend who, after the first season, she said that these friends of hers in the States, like the mainland, had watched the show and like really loved the costuming and was really interested in costuming. And so, if I could send an autograph or something like that, which is something I always feel a bit odd about because it's an autograph. I mean, so, and he said, of course, and my wife said, well, you should actually, send a sketch or something and a little note on it or whatever. So that was the plan. And so we did that. But then I actually found out after the fact that this girl was turning 14 and is trans. And that what was happening in her neighborhood was they were having these umbrella parties where all the kids would get together and watch the show. And because of the, nature of the characters, Vanya and Klaus, it actually brought a greater acceptance in her community towards her, just a greater understanding of the different kinds of people out there. And that really touched me deeply because I thought, if a show can actually have that effect, like that's something I want to be a part of. I really, really was very pleased to learn about that and hear that story. So this is all the upswing and the positive thing about, all the social media and the access and all that type of thing. It's a good thing.
So do you want to talk about the Swedes? Because I mean, seriously, they're a riot. I love them so much. And also I want to talk about the scene with, the underwear. There's a lot of underwear in this show. Undergarments.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're such a kinky bunch. I have to find some pictures to put up on the Instagram because they come from this tiny fishing village. And there's a great sort of stills photo that Axel holds in his hand, sort of a touching memory, and them posing with their mother back in the village. The actors that they put together were just all kind of perfect. And Chris Holden Reed, he was the Axel playing the underwear chef. And I mean, he was totally game. Like we did him in just underwear, in an underwear with an apron, underwear with a half apron. But yeah, they were just like this kind of sociopathic group of people. Tom, who played the younger one, he only smiles when he's like killed somebody. Like he's got this deadpan face all the time. But then if he clicks, and then he's kind of like this funny little smile. So they all sort of evolved these little personalities. But I just wanted them to look like, that was another actual inspiration I got from that same market. They had real sort of clothes from all these, from longshoremen and all kinds of things like that, just all the different kinds of details on the clothing. And we actually did a ton of breakdown on their clothes, and I don't think it reads. They don't look as distressed as they actually were in person. But there was also
they've been wearing the same outfit for,
Yeah, oh yeah. They basically, coat on, coat off type of thing, or underwear, pants back on. But there was some talk at one point of doing them in sort of a killing outfit, like when they go on a rampage, and sort of hearkening back to the costuming in Clockwork Orange. And I was so stoked to do that. I was just so excited to do it. But then in the end, there was no real place in the script to introduce that whole sort of element that, again, would have come out of nowhere, where those clothes would have come from. But yeah, they were a lot of fun nonetheless.
So tell me about I'm just laughing thinking about it. Tell me about Klaus's diaper, his sort of guru loincloth. I'm not sure what you call it, to be honest with you.
It was a loincloth, yeah. It was a loincloth.
Who came up with that idea?
I think it was actually scripted, because that's supposed to be the River Ganges. Like that whole element was slightly different. If you notice, the background, we're all dressed in colorful hippie clothes. And then, the garlands were all multicolored, and there was a lot of color in the background of, the Indian town behind. It's all very colorful, very sort of, spice colors. And so yeah, we, that's one of the great things about Robert, is he's just so easy and fitting. He had underwear on or something like that. But, I actually made a mistake in that, because I should have just built the whole thing on a dance belt. I hate to put actors in dance belts because I think they're incredibly uncomfortable, but they're a lot more secure. So I didn't want him to be in pain. So I think we built it on a jock strap or something like that, and it worked, but it was a little bit more slippy slidey. So the set person had to make sure that it was pulled up to the right height and everything, because I think he came in and out of that water numerous times before he finally, they got the take.
And things stretch out when they get wet.
Yeah, I mean, they get wet and kind of soggy, and we made more than one, but I don't think they bothered changing them. He just had to keep going back in again.
Yeah, wow. But it was really, really funny. And like he just seems so comfortable in his own skin. I
So
mean,
comfortable. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, he's one of the most comfortable people in his body I've ever met. Just, I mean, I remember one day I was going to the the unit, the trucks where the hair and makeup and the wardrobe and everything is, and I was walking through the parking lot, and it was from season one. It was a pair of underwear that he wore that was multicolored. I can't remember what the scene was, and he was just hanging in the parking lot in his underwear. It was like summer, 80 degrees,
Wow.
and
Was he wearing shoes?
no,
No
no,
shoes
he
either.
actually loves being barefoot. I think that
Okay.
even in the winter,
So
anytime he
season
could be
two is
barefoot.
him then. He's basically that's him in season two.
Well, yeah, I think there's a certain degree. I mean, he's not quite. His voice is a little different in person. He's a little bit more focused in person. But well, I mean, I think not being an actor myself, but I think that actors bring a certain degree of their own personality into their characters. And I think some of those kind of characters that really endure and are really beloved often are reflections of the actual actor. Like there's sort of a lovability and that type of thing. So yeah, it's actually really fun to see how loved he is. It's just
Hmm.
so many different Twitter and Instagram accounts just focused on him.
So I was going to ask you about your staff. Like, so I know you have a team of people that you work with, and it sounds like a lot of people you tend to work with over and over again. But for this show, tell us a little bit about your team.
I have two assistants who we have to work out some kind of a balance because there's things like fittings to be organized or research to be done or sourcing of things online, all kinds of stuff, getting assisting in fittings, like organizing the change room after the fitting and sort of neatening it up. We also have like a production assistant for that, a costumer who's sort of more entry level, who can sort of witness and understand and learn. um, an assistant will help in a fitting. I do the pinning normally. I mean, or the cutter, depending on if I buy this stuff, then I'll just pin it. I do tend to tailor stuff a lot, so there's a lot of pins by the time I'm finished. But you can also have the tailor in there. It works a little differently, I think, in Canada. I think in the States, there tend to be more people in a fitting. I think the designer, the cutter, the assistant, like another person, somebody writing notes, like there's
Oh,
about
that's a
five
lot.
people.
Hmm.
But for me, I mean, often I'll do fittings by myself. I
Hmm.
mean, I'll just, have somebody come in because we're churning. So, everybody's busy and, I don't want to do a fitting with Kate by myself because there's too many elements involved. But, if it's, who can I even think of? Well, I've done fittings with Klaus by myself,
Hmm.
with Robert. That's totally doable.
Yeah.
And
And
then
then
I
do you
have,
usually take pictures in between? Like,
oh yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. We take pic. I mean,
that's a great thing about digital photos now.
yeah, some of those pictures I put up on my Instagram. I just make sure that I ask the actors if they mind, like because they're not in hair and makeup most of the time, so I don't want to put them up because they're not fully in their character. But sometimes they do come in like after they've shot a scene when they're gonna before they go home. So if they're in hair and makeup and it's a decent shot, then I'll ask them if I can put it up. Um, and then I have a supervisor, and that's a person who really oversees the department. Any kind of purchases that different areas want to make, they go through her with the request. She sort of oversees the finances. She does the breakdown of the scripts to see how many changes there are, how many script days. The supervisor is a very vital element, and often it's the first hire of a costume designer on a show. Sometimes supervisors come with a complete team. Like I'm in Vancouver right now,
Hmm.
and my supervisor actually was the person who brought all these people together. I've got a wonderful crew here, but they've never met me before. But my supervisor knew who I was, and we've known each other over time. So it's really thanks to her that I have this incredible crew in a very busy town. And then there's often a money tracker nowadays. Some of these positions are new because the nature of the business has grown and evolved, and paperwork has become such a major element. It didn't used to be such a big thing. The whole, use of computers and everything like that has changed things. So on a big show, you really need a money tracker, somebody who's strictly doing inputting of finances and, is happy to sort of be in their corner and more or less left alone, except when I go up and, do a dance around them or something like that. But just to make sure they're still awake. And then shoppers. On Umbrella, I had 2 full-time shoppers, fabric sourcing locally or online, buying in the stores. Again, I used to do more of this, but I just find I'm not able to do it as much on this show anyway. Because it's kind of great if you can have a great shopper and also yourself shopping. You get a really good blend of things, different eyes looking at something. It's just a more comprehensive completion of a package for a fitting. A really great shopper will come back with 2 or 3 choices, and sometimes it's something that I never would have thought of or I wouldn't have seen in the shops that I went into. So that's always great to have. And then when moving into the cutting room on the show last season, we had 2 cutters I mentioned, Roland and Phil, and they were both tailors, men's and ladies' clothes, and then a team of sewers. We had 5, I think.
That's a big crew, like what, 20 people or so?
Yeah, more actually, I think.
More.
Then we get to the back and there's Milena doing the hats and all the sort of specialty builds. And then you go further back past the laundry room and we have, the breakdown artist who, ages things, airbrushes things, washes and, works things in. Spent a lot of time on the Swedes, in Klaus, for instance, we had to sort of break down his Sherwani, his, guru coat into different stages for different, time frames. So they're very important. Then we have the PA who really is learning and does a lot of driving, a lot of pickups and drop-offs. They're not allowed to do a lot of specific costuming, but there's really there more to observe. And then the background coordinator, and then the set, we have the overseer, the supervisor on set. We have the person on the truck coordinating there. Sometimes there's an assistant truck person if it's a large cast that day, just helping coordinate everything. Then there's a background on-set person who makes sure that the background behave and don't take off something. If they're wearing a hat at the beginning of the day, they're still wearing it at the end of the day if they're supposed to. And that's pretty much it. And then the rest of it goes into, specialty calls, depending on how big the scene is. We'll have people come in and help, for the day.
So what I wanted to know is, what percentage of costumes did you build versus buy? I know you bought a lot, it sounds like, but how many did you actually make, do you think, percentage-wise?
Most of the building was for, either the leads or, people like the Swedes. It might almost be a 50%, quite honestly.
Oh, that's a lot.
No, it's a huge build show.
Yeah, that's a lot.
A lot of building.
Now I know you talked a little bit about a few modern techniques like the puff paint techniques. Like regarding 3D printing, any of that stuff, did you kind of get into any of that type of thing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing that's interesting is that often the old techniques that are tried and true and they've been around for decades, they're just as good. If you have the time. I mean, the 3D printing, we did that on the Temps in season 1. And the thing was, the Temps, that costume happened over a 2-week period. It was very fast. We were really, really busy on the show. And then, this was coming up in the final episode and we had to have a bunch of them because there was, a dozen of them stunted and whatever. But yeah, I kind of had to do that very quickly. So we sort of designed the elements, and then some of them we could actually buy off of,
Etsy or?
Well, no, sports kind of,
Oh,
protective
okay.
gear,
Oh, sure. Yes, yes.
which is kind of a common go-to
Tactical.
for, yeah, it's a go-to for, and that's a bit of a thing that I, don't really want to go to because it's been done and done, and I've done it other times as well when I didn't have time. So just a small part of that was like that, but then, all the shoulder pads and everything those were molded, but then there were other pieces that were in keeping with the armature that I got off of, other equipment, and there weren't the appropriate shapes or pieces. For instance, we did pieces on the ladies' chests that
Hmm.
were sort of molded in the shape of their breasts, so those weren't really available. So we had those 3D printed, and there are a few other pieces on that costume.
So are there like special like companies that deal with the film industry that you go
Oh
to?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
There's some big ones. Yeah, there's in Toronto and LA. There,
Hmm.
it's quite evolved now, actually.
It'll be kind of exciting in the future. Like the wardrobes themselves will just be able to have their own 3D printer. You'll be able to design something perhaps and then just have it printed. Maybe in the future we'll start seeing more of that.
Well, I have a designer friend who was talking about buying a 3D printer because, the amount of money she spends on having it done for her show, which is sci-fi, they could probably save a bomb and just have the printer in-house.
Now, oh, okay. Now, so I know this might be like some of your secrets, but do you have any spots that you like to shop that maybe like a few that you could throw out there? Some of your hot places that you go like, oh, I know I'll find something there. They always have cool
Okay, well, I
things.
mean, in New York, I always had to Mood Fabric like immediately. It's
Yeah.
it's just the go-to because they have so many different. It's really in the best sense of the word an old-fashioned jobber. The owner of the company actually is like a real estate guy. He has buildings and investments and things like that. But his whole family works there, and I love the staff. They're all super helpful. I know them all by name now. Whenever I show up, they're all super welcoming, and it's like a tornado. I mean, I'm like running back and forth with rolls, and they're like measuring it out and cutting it and piling it up and shipping it that day. I mean, they're just amazing, and I love the
Like great
variety.
service.
Yeah, yeah, very, very good service. And in Toronto, I mean, Queen Street, the fabric sourcing has really, shrunk as it has pretty much everywhere. But along Queen Street, we still have, some great suppliers. Leo's is,
I love Leo's.
yeah, Susie and Linda, her daughter, and Ling, who work there. They're all same. I mean, they'll ship anywhere, and they're, always really, really fun to see. I mean, really for a costumer, I think one of the biggest benefits of doing this job is the contact with people because the range of personalities and interests and when I think about the basements I've been in, looking at somebody's personal stash that they want to sell or upstairs. I mean, I think a lot of that happens more with my friend Victoria, who has a shop in Toronto called Gadabout.
Oh, I know
Um,
Gadabout. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
great
well,
store.
and she was kind of in the corporate world and running the store, part time. And then she had help, but she was still doing her corporate career. And then finally, it was really doing well, and she, could basically take it on full time. And she's an amazing resource because I don't want to say this because it'll sound negative, but I mean, she's probably like a master hoarder. I mean, she just has so many things that you could possibly dream up. If I'm looking for a vintage lace, when I was doing the dying wife of Hargreeves at the end of season one, I wanted to give her sort of like a kind of a wrap, sort of a capelet kind of thing out of antique laces. And so, she went into her drawers and pulled out all these bags of antique lace. And I took ones that had a similar kind of, it was all this crueling and everything. And they were all a little bit sort of yellowed, but I bought ones that had a similar kind of, or complementary patterning. And then, and they were all different shapes, of course, because they were elements taken off of dresses from the 20s, et cetera. And we sort of soaked them in oxy OxyClean and a drop of bleach, and then they came much lighter, like almost white.
Yeah.
And then I on a
So
mannequin, I
this
basically
will be a good tip from you. this is Christopher's helpful hints regarding if you have
if,
antique lace.
if you ever want to make something out of
You have
antique
to be
lace.
careful with the bleach though, right? Because especially if it's
No,
something that's
just a
delicate,
drop.
just a
Just a
drop of
drop.
bleach.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And
OxyClean, I've used that before too. I think it works pretty well.
yeah, no, and that's a tip from a supplier that I had in upstate New York, because her
Mhm.
clothes always came looking brand new. I said, "Are these clothes brand new?" And she just pressed them beautifully, packaged them beautifully. But she said, "No, I just, that," and that was her secret. She used OxyClean and a drop of bleach, just let it soak for a while. So anyhow, then we overdyed. We pieced it all together, overdyed into a sort of a rosy kind of color, and that was what she ended up wearing over her nightie when she's lying in her deathbed. There are there are a ton of new vintage shops. Kensington Market used to be my go-to place. I mean, Courage, my love, of course.
Mhm.
And they source from all over the world. I mean, I don't know if they're doing it so much now. Cece, their lovely daughter, has taken over,
Yes. Yeah.
but they've been friends for years, and they have beads from India, and vintage clothes, and I mean, really, there's just so many things that you can pick up there. There's a few. Actually a really amazing vintage store in Ottawa as well that I went to. What's it called? Ragtime. And the lady, it's a husband and wife, but the lady, I've known her since the 70s. I used to actually put my own clothes into her store, and she sold them. So they've been
Oh,
out for
really? From your
40
collection.
years.
Hmm.
Like, not my vintage collection, my own clothes. Like,
Oh,
I
your
had a
own
lot.
clothes. Okay.
I used to travel, and I just basically picked things up, and then if I didn't really want to wear it anymore, I'd just see if she wanted to have it in her inventory. So I don't know. I've been discovering more and more. There's a place on Queen Street called Who's Your Mama, I think, or
That's a
and
good name.
she actually sells some of the stock from a wonderful costume designer and vintage collector. His name's Jewel Hallmeyer,
Yep,
and
I know Joel very well.
so anyway, she's she buys certain pieces off of him, and you can see the JHD, Jewel Hallmeyer design, sort of written into the neck of
Hmm.
the clothes. But he always had just an amazing eye. He would go out foraging on the weekends and out of town and that type of thing over many years. And sometimes I'd go visit him, and he would have just had a fresh haul from
If anybody doesn't know who he is, he's the original costume designer for SCTV. And I had the great pleasure of working with him one time on an event, an SCTV event, and a lovely person.
Mhm.
But I'm always it's funny, I'm always like Christopher, I'm always making references to SCTV. I'm like, oh my God, have you seen that SCTV skit? Like I just did it the other day. So funny, like
Well,
Richard
I'm always making
Harris.
references to them too,
Yeah,
because
always.
I always thought that show was brilliant, and
It is brilliant.
I actually went to see at Second City, probably when I was going to university in the mid '70s. I went to see, and it was all Andrea Martin and Eugene Levy and all of them. They were all just on stage improvising, and yeah, no, it was a brilliant series, and I always preferred it over Saturday Night Live.
Oh,
I
yeah.
never really laughed the way I laughed for SCTV the same way.
Any idea, Christopher, when we might see season 3?
I don't even know if they've announced it yet, quite honestly. I'm pretty sure there'll be one, because I think they've written all the scripts now. And I'm hoping to start back on it pretty soon. But I think in this particular day and age, we just have to go, 1 week at a time, because we just don't know, what's going to happen, moving into the future. But we're all trying very hard. I mean, when I'm working now, I wear a mask, I wear a face shield. When I go into any public place, I'm like the freak who's got like a mask and a face shield on. I don't really care. I actually have a face shield that I got at the dollar store that seems to be the envy of my production office, because it's actually like a pair of clear glasses and then a face
Oh,
shield, and it's not too big, so it's not like
yeah.
bumping into you.
So what have you got coming up? I know you're working on something right now. Do you want to tell us
Mhm.
about it and what you have coming up in the future?
Well, it's a film that I'm working on right now. It's called Solitary. It's very different from. I was very attracted to it because I love the script. the script was written and it's being directed by Nate Parker, who did Birth of a Nation and other things. Just a really beautifully crafted story that's very relevant. It's about, it's solitary. It's really about solitary confinement. And it's, basically a study on the U.S. penal system. And so it's takes on the subjects of mental health and, the whole structure of the prison system in the U.S. and how broken it is and how it doesn't work and how, change needs to come into play. So it's a very different, there are moments of humor, but it's actually a very strong statement. But I love the actors. It's got David Oyelowo in it, who's an amazing actor and very fine human being. The whole crew that's come together. For me, it's a very special project, and I thought when I was called about it, that the right people would come to this film. And I just find that every department, even though filming in Vancouver is, really gearing up more so, I think, than anywhere else in the country at the moment. They were sort of the first ones to get going. So it's now very, very busy, but I have the most amazing crew, and I find every department is just fantastic. So, and I think that's what this show deserves and requires. So I'm excited about it. I'm very honored to be part of it because under normal circumstances, I think that they would be probably seeking out a African American or Canadian costume designer, but there aren't a lot of them. I know most of them, and they're all busy. So I was really pleased that, and I mean, Nate Parker really, his goal is to put together the best people, that are, he can find. He felt he could adapt it into the reality that we're living now, and it really is a suspense thriller.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's a very cool story and script, and so it actually incorporates the pandemic into the storyline, which adds another layer of dread to the actual telling of the tale, because they talk about an outbreak in the city, and it's.
Oh, and didn't you say that people have to actually wear masks in the story, in the movie?
Yeah, they're going to wear
So that's going to be that's going to sort of work in the favor of
because
safely.
Well, they're in quarantine. I mean, there are all kinds of protocols. I mean, everybody's feeling their way right now, but anybody who comes to work on set has to be tested, and then I think that everybody will be masked until the scene. The people that will. There's a lot of scenes in this, location that's isolated. So that's really just the lead actors.
So they'll be the only ones without masks.
There are about 5 of them,
Okay.
and then some of the opening scenes, there are groups of people, but they're basically, they all have to be tested. There have to be backups in case somebody gets tested and they're not, able to come and work. It adds another couple of layers of complexity onto our process. Gone are the 11th hour fittings or actors, showing up the day before. All the actors are, the leads are quarantining right now because we're supposed to go to camera in a couple of weeks. I'm going to get them, the week part at the end of the week before we go to camera. So I'm doing these fittings online the way we're talking right now, and
okay.
I can't touch them, or I just have to look and see what I think I need to do. Some stuff I can actually see just by, from experience, but other things, you really do need to actually have it on the person to, but it's not really a costume show. I mean, the costumes play a part of the story and identify the characters and that type of thing, but it's not, a build show or, I mean, if it wasn't in this time and place, it would probably be the easiest show I've ever worked on for costuming, because it's not a big cast and it's, a limited kind of closet for each actor. So, wow.
So anyways, oh my gosh, thank you so much for doing this. This has been like amazing. I've learned so much from you.
Oh, Heidi, I've learned from you too. And plus, you're just so easy to talk to. I mean, really, we could do this all day, I think.
Thank you so much for everyone for watching today. And as well, I want to say thank you to my very special guest, Chrsitopher Hargadon, who took the time out to chat with me about the Umbrella Academy. Thank you so much, Chrsitopher.
Heidi, it was my absolute pleasure, and I would be happy to dialogue with you anytime. You're a great interviewer, one of the best I've run across, I think.
Oh my gosh, that's such a lovely compliment. Thank you so
No,
much.
it's true.
And Chrsitopher, next time he comes to Toronto, we're going to get together for coffee because we have so much more to talk about because we both love movies and
Looking
shopping
forward
and
to it.
fabric.
Thank
All
you
right, well, thanks so
thank you
much.
for your interest. I so appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye.